Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that is 7 reasons why your legs are not defined. And just because that's a big complaint that I get, and I want to go over my biggest things that I see there. Before we dive into that, though, just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you're sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. We also find that there's at least 1 to 2 bottlenecks outside of the training and nutrition protocol that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. If you're interested in finding out more about this, you can reach out to me on Instagram or fill out the link in the show notes and we can continue that conversation. If you aren't interested in full coaching, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan for the next couple months. If you just want to find out more information about body recomp, I have my 75-minute masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it, and you can find the link to that in the show notes. Next, if you can follow me on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_, that's where I'm most active and where I post the most content on social media. And then lastly, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's podcast. Have you been working out your legs, but you're not really seeing the progress that you want to see with them? Something I hear is, for some reason, I just can't get my legs to be defined like I want, no matter how much I do. And so there's a lot of things I see as to why somebody may have trouble building muscle in their legs, and then why it's hard for them to see definition, or why their legs just don't progress, right? And so I'm going to dive into what those are. So let's go into them. So the first one, and this is an easy one, and it's tough to do because the legs are hard to train, but it's not taking the muscle close enough to failure. You lift, but when you train, you're leaving too many reps in the tank too often, right? You're leaving 3, 4, 5+ reps in the tank. And we know that based on a lot of research that's come out, when it comes to muscle growth, you don't have to go to failure every single time. But one of the big proxies for muscle growth is just making sure that it's a challenging set and you're taking that target muscle relatively close to failure. As I go through this, there's going to be other things here that we talk about that kind of go into why it's tough to take, why people struggle to take the quads specifically close to failure. And we're going to talk mostly quads here, right? But this does apply to hamstrings and glutes as well too. Quads make up a big chunk of the legs. But a few things is, first of all, they suck to train. They're super hard. So it's really hard to get them close to failure, right? That it does involve some discomfort and whatnot there with that. So I think that's a big thing. Exercise selection is a big one. And then rep ranges too, right? I think sometimes people maybe try to lift with too many reps because I think that's what's going to tone their legs, right? And then it's really hard to get close to failure there when you train in these higher rep ranges, right? Anything like north of 12 to 20, especially for legs. What you end up see happening is you need to get closer to failure, even closer than you would with 5 to 12 reps. But then on top of it, it's your cardiovascular system ends up being the limiting factor. You stop because you're breathing heavy. And then again, it's hard to stay focused for that long a time. And it's hard to sit through that discomfort of these higher rep ranges. So this means the legs probably are going to be a little bit better in that 6 to 15 rep range, 6 to 12 rep range most of the time, because it's going to be a little bit easier to get you close to failure there, but you also don't have to go as close to failure when you do these lower rep ranges, right? So again, if you don't train hard enough, you're not going to build as much muscle as you like in your legs. I think this is probably the most common reason why people don't have the legs that they want, is they just don't take it close to failure. And again, it's tough. It's uncomfortable. There's some other factors too, like we talked about exercise selection, which we'll go over here in a little bit, that could also be playing a role in this as well too. But we want to make sure that we are training close enough to failure. That needs to be the priority. I think a lot of times people do try to find certain things like, oh, is it the exercise I'm doing? Is it the program I'm doing? Is it the split? Is it my nutrition? When really it comes down to, you need to push yourself a little bit more with your legs. And again, that can be uncomfortable. It sucks and whatnot, but getting your legs closer to failure is priority number 1, right? This would be the thing that I would look at, double check 5 times to make sure that you are doing this. So it's not taking the target muscle close enough to failure. Second big mistake I see made is too much endurance / cardio type training. As you guys know, I'm a proponent of cardio endurance training at this point. I think it is very beneficial for overall health, body composition, and whatnot. And it can be additive to your weight training so long as it's not programmed irresponsibly. And again, so some cardio is great, but if you're looking to get more defined legs, you need to build muscle, right? So we need to make sure we're taking that target muscle close to failure, like we just talked about, right? But too often people are they're trying to do too much cardio to get their legs defined. They think that if they do more cardio, that's what's going to be what's going to get their legs defined and whatnot. But again, it's going to come through building muscle, losing some body fat, which that's going to be done through movement and nutrition. And then obviously you sprinkle on this cardio training on top of it, but you do that for the health benefits and the cardiovascular benefits, not to tone a muscle or to build muscle. So if most of your training is cardio based, I think 50% or more, I don't think your legs are going to be they're not going to be as defined as you want them to be. So again, we want to make sure that we get closer to failure and we spend more time training our legs through resistance training versus cardiovascular training, especially when we are in the fat loss process as well too. It puts a lot of, especially if you do a lot of running, like stair stepper, I feel like it can put a lot of like submaximal training in there that can tire out your legs. And then it's like, you're not able to progress your legs as much as you want. Again, this is done when they go to the extremes, right? They do too much high intensity work. They do, too much high intensity cardio, right? Like their heart rate's outside of zone 2. It's in zone 3, 4, 5. And they're choosing things like running as their only source of cardio, and they just do too much volume, right? So too much high intensity in terms of heart rate, too high volume, and then the modalities, right? Those are the like kind of 3 common mistakes I see made there with cardio. So just make sure you spend a little bit more time on the weight training side of things, right? And then also from the endurance cardio type training, people try to do a little bit too much. They try to turn their training into a combination of weight training and cardio based, right? And then this is where you get into these like 12 to 20 rep ranges. And it's, I'm breathing heavy. I'm doing some resistance training. I feel a little bit of the burn in my legs. Oh, that's good enough. That's going to help me get the best of both worlds. Again, we need to make sure we take the target muscle close to failure, not like you're like, oh, I'm tired. I'm breathing heavy. My legs feel a little burn. I'm close to failure. No, that's not what we need. We need the muscle, your quad muscles, to be the limiting factor there with that. So number 3, no progressive overload. Okay, so we have people that stay too far away from failure. Maybe they do a little bit too much cardio-based training. Again, this could be just too much cardio, but also in terms of the rep ranges that they train in, they try to turn their weight training sessions into more of a cardio-based training session. But then on top of it, people, they don't focus on progressive overload in their training. They're weight training, but they're not ever making progress. Their weight training, like either they don't track it, and so they're just like, oh, well, I did 4 plates on the leg press last week. Let's just throw 5 on. Let's do this. Or there's no structure to that. It's just random every week. Or they're just changing exercises too often. And so it's really hard to progressively overload with your legs. So you don't track what you do. And because of that, you never actually progress. In order to build muscle, we need to make sure that over time we're doing more, right? We're putting more tension and stimulus on the muscle. This can be done through more weight. This can be done through more reps, better technique. And it doesn't have to be every single time you train. But if you look back on the last 3 months and leg press is the same, or it's gone down a little bit, or it's just hasn't been consistent, it's going to be tough to know if you actually built muscle. And it's just going to be this like, I don't really know what's going on type of situation. Whereas if you can keep a certain exercise in there, let's take the leg press. You get the technique dialed in, it really hits your quads. And then you look over the last 3 months and it was like you were doing 320 or you were doing 300 pounds initially for 8 reps. Now you're hitting 360 for sets of 8 to 12 with fantastic technique. That's a great sign that you built muscle, right? Same thing, you could take the leg extension as well too. But if you're not tracking that, it's going to be hard to know that you are making progress. So we want to make sure that we are implementing progressive overload. Next, too much burn work. You're just chasing the feeling of your legs working hard. So this can just be like, oh, I'm just going to do like a ton of lunges, body weight, just to get the burn in my legs. And again, this is better than nothing, but you're probably not, like, you don't know if you're progressing. You're not applying progressive overload. Are you going close to muscular failure? Like the burn can be a sign, but that's not everything. So you need to make sure you add some weight and again, get stronger in these 6 to 12 rep range exercises for the quads. Again, over time, we want to make sure that you're getting stronger in that 6 to 12 rep range. If you're just going for the burn and, oh, that was a good leg workout today because I felt the burn. I felt very fatigued afterwards. Again, these are good signs, but they don't mean that you're actually building muscle, especially if over time you're not getting stronger or anything like that, or taking the target muscle relatively close to failure. You could get a good burn doing cycling or something like that. That doesn't mean you're actually building muscle and sending that signal to build more muscle. So be careful with doing too much burn work. Again, we want to make sure that we're progressively overloading over time. And this was the one I alluded to earlier for exercise selection. You're just choosing random exercises you saw on IG from your favorite influencer. We want to stick with the basics and different variations of these, right? Different variations of lunges, different variations of squats, hip thrusts, RDLs. Specifically for quad development, we want to look at adding in some heel elevated work as well. That can be super helpful to really hit your quads there as well. But for example, we can also take exercise selection from a couple different ways. One, oh, hey, I heard back squats are great. That means I have to do back squat. But it's like for you, that's not a great lift. So again, we want to make sure we don't put ourselves in this box of, oh, so-and-so said that's a great exercise. I need to do it. It has to be my program. But if to go back to, we want to make sure we take the target muscle close to failure. If a back squat for you, you feel it more in your glutes and your knees, but you don't feel it in your quads, is that a good quad exercise for you? Or if you feel it more in like your low back and everything just hurts and you're not ever able, you feel it more in your core and you stop because the fact that those things hurt and you're out of breath, that's not a great exercise for your quads, right? You want to find something that really hits those quads and allows you to take the quad muscles close to failure, right? So this could be a hack squat, it could be a pendulum squat, it could be a leg press, whatever it may be. So again, we want to make sure that we're choosing exercises that fit us and allow us to do those things that I have talked about already, right? Take the target muscle close to failure and you're able to progressively overload over time. Those are going to be exercises that we want to keep in. But also on the exercise selection too, we can take this from another viewpoint of don't be changing your exercises all the time. Like I just talked about earlier, that's going to be hard for progressive overload because you're not ever really going to learn how to dial in the movement for your quads or whatever muscle group you want it to be. And it's going to be hard to track that and know if you're progressing or not. It's going to be more so like you're just going to have to go off of, okay, so every 3 months, I'm going to take a progress picture and see if there's some progress. But the thing that sucks about muscle growth is that it's really hard to tell what's going on. And it's also very dependent on like your current level of body fat, right? So if you're in like a building phase, it's really hard to tell if you're actually adding muscle in a lot of situations because there's a little bit of body fat there and you don't fully see that until you cut off some of your or drop some of your body fat. So at that point, you end up going 3 to 6 months down the line of being like, oh, I hope I built muscle. And then you have to like, oh, well, I didn't. So now I have to go back to the drawing board. So this is why we want to make sure we track and we're not always switching up exercises. Try to stick with the same exercise for 2 to 3 training blocks that are anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks long. That's a pretty long time, but again, that's going to be a good sign that you're really dialing in that exercise and really able to progress it. Otherwise, things are going to get a little bit murky and it's going to be hard to understand if you're actually progressing. Again, with exercise selection, it's making sure we're not just picking random exercises. We want to find exercises that fit you well, but also making sure you're not varying up your exercises too often. And these last two are going to be more nutrition related because I do think this is important. The next one is never taking time away from trying to lose body fat, right? You're always trying to be in that deficit. You're always trying to drop body fat. And when this happens, you never give your body a chance to build more muscle. Again, I think initially this could work if I talk about how you are able to lose body fat and build muscle at the same time, but the conditions need to be there and you can get away with that for a little bit of time. But eventually you are going to have to switch to getting out of a fat loss phase. Otherwise you are going to limit how much muscle you can grow, which in turn is going to hurt the toneness definition of your legs. So we want to make sure we take periods of time to fuel for training and muscle growth. Again, we want to make sure that we're at least out of a deficit. If you really want to maximize muscle growth, you probably want to be in a small surplus. If you just want to have a pretty good amount of muscle and just less body fat, being close to maintenance, higher end of your maintenance is going to be very solid for you, with obviously other good factors like sleep, stress management, macros, making sure you get enough protein. And then obviously the big one, the training aspect of it, the things we talked about already, progressive overload, taking the muscles close to failure, right? Those are all going to be the most important things there with that. So again, we just want to make sure we take time away from trying to drop body fat because again, this is going to hurt our body's ability to add more muscle. You're not going to have enough energy around for it to be like, oh, okay, hey, let's build more muscle. The body needs to make sure that it has plenty of energy to take care of other things before it continues to add more and more muscle. Again, if you have no muscle at all and you start to weight train, you don't necessarily have to be in the surplus because your body's going to be like, okay, hey, we do need to add some muscle here. But once you get to the point to where it's like, all right, we've got a good amount of muscle here. Adding more under these conditions isn't going to be helpful, right? In these conditions being an energy deficit. So at that point, you have to make that decision what you want to do there. So again, make sure you take some time away from trying to lose body fat. If you are having trouble seeing definition in your legs and then you look back at your last year and you've try to diet 4 or 5 times, or and then when you aren't doing anything, you're just eating anything and everything, you need to make sure that you have a little bit more structure there with your nutrition, right? Set up some phases, in a fat loss phase and out of it. And then lastly, not enough protein. This is a big one too. So again, this goes under the nutrition side of things. Protein is crucial for building and repairing muscles. If you don't get enough protein in your diet, it can hinder the development of muscle growth. Again, a big thing here where obviously we need that training stimulus to build muscle, right? We need to make sure we lift weights. We need to take the target muscle close to failure over time. We need to make sure we're progressively overloading to send that signal to build muscle. But then protein is going to be there to complete the process. Without protein, you can sit there and you can tell the body to build muscle. It might build a little bit, but if it's not getting enough protein, you are definitely not going to maximize your muscle growth. It's always going to be limited at least a little bit around that. So we want to make sure we get enough protein in per day. So what is that? It's about 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. I think that's a solid number for most people. Some people can maybe push it a little bit less than that. If you enjoy protein, you can go a little bit higher than that to just be on the safe side. But I think that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight per day is where you're going to want to be there with that. So that is going to wrap up this episode. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this topic, and I will chat with you next time.